Hi everyone, welcome to our event. This event is brought to you by Datadog's Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events, and today is one of such events. If you want to find out more about the events we have, there is a link in the description. Click on this and you'll see all the events we have in our pipeline. There's at least one workshop, so check it out. It's interesting. It's about data engineering and ingestion. So then do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This way you'll get notified about all the future streams like the one we have today. And last but not least, do not forget to check our community where you can hang out with other data enthusiasts. During today's interview, you can ask any question you want. There is a pinned link in the live chat. Click on that link, ask your questions, and we will be covering these questions during the interview. And with that, stop sharing my screen, open the questions that Johanna prepared. And if you're ready, we can start.
Sure, let's go.
Yeah, so this week we'll talk about MLOps in corporations and MLOps in startups, and we have a special guest, Nemanja, and this is not the first time we have him in this interview. We had one last year. It was about machine learning engineering in finance. And actually, this was, according to our statistics, was one of the most popular, most listened episodes of the last year. And then in LinkedIn, Nemanja mentioned, hey, how about we record another one? And I thought, amazing idea. Why did I not think about this myself? Right? So, yeah. So welcome back. It's great pleasure to have you again. And
Likewise.
yeah. And again, the questions for today's interview are prepared by Johanna Bayer. Thanks, Johanna, for your help. And so while we had a small talk, which will be cut, you gave us a small update, but maybe you can also give us a bigger update and also include some things for those who do not know you, for those who did not hear the previous podcast interview. Can you tell us about your career journey so far, and then maybe give us an update of what you've been up to in the last year?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so again, starting from the name, Nemanja Radojkovic. I was born and raised in Belgrade, Serbia, where I finished my bachelor's and master's studies in electrical engineering in signals and systems, which was my first exposure to the machine learning theory. And after a short work experience over there, I came to Belgium. I came to do a PhD in bioengineering. So it might sound like a weird switch from electrical engineering to bioengineering, but in this domain of signals and systems, basically the theory you learn, like you probably also know how many data scientists can switch from one domain to another, because the underlying theory of systems modeling is pretty much applicable to any system that we can encounter. So I came here to Belgium to do a PhD, but it quickly turned out I'm not really an academic type. So after a year and a half of, I would say, limping through that job, I decided to take an offer I got for working in a consultancy. I went to work for Deloitte Consulting in Belgium, stayed there for around 3 years, and that's so already the PhD was, I would say, the first paid job in data science. And then I went to the consulting industry to do a bit more and more of that, and started doing a bit of machine learning engineering along the way. So at that moment, this was mainly prototyping models, so data wrangling, making some early models, and suddenly there came a need to deploy things, and MLOps was not a thing back then. This was like 2016, 17. It was not a term, but somebody needed to do it. And basically that's how I started more and more learning, let's say, proper Python development practices, project packaging, deploying things on AWS and so forth. And I made like a slow shift into machine learning engineering. And I think since 2019, I'm I would say full-blown, full-time machine learning engineer. And I worked in these last 5-6 years mainly in the financial industry. That's why we had this talk last time. I worked for several companies, several big banks, for example, ING, BNP Paribas. I worked for Euroclear, which is the largest clearinghouse in Europe. yeah, I think I'm missing only one or two. I worked for KBC for a couple of months also. So I think I'm just missing a couple of banks in Belgium to have all the Pokemons collected. And yeah, so in June last year, I decided to finally do something which I planned to do for years, and that's to become a freelancer. And yeah, that happened. And so I had a little short mission with KBC. Then I switched to this Brussels-based startup with which I'm working now. It's just a very short mission of a couple of months just to help them industrialize some code, some Python code. And yeah, now I will, since from February, I will be starting to work with another company in Ghent. So that's it. So as you can see from these last 10 years of, I've been around quite a lot, around various companies and industries. So apart from finance, I worked for some clients in healthcare, also in the transportation and like logistics industry, chemical industry, and so forth. And most of my experience was in big companies, like what you would call Fortune 500. So corporations, whether it's a consultancy or whether it's like an end client, it was mainly most of my time I spent with these big corporations, and that was practically the only way I knew how to do things. And then I moved like last 2 months, as I said, I'm working with this Belgian-based startup called Tembo, and it's an amazing thing, I would say, amazing experience of how things can work in a startup, and it's in a way
quite a difference, right?
so yeah, it feels like flying, I would say, in many ways.
Because you
And
don't
it's
have bureaucratic restrictions, or why?
indeed, that's the main thing. So it's really, of course, I know very well that these bureaucratic restrictions often, there is a reason why they exist. Of course, they are a big safety net and rail guards, but too often, yeah, they're just an obstacle, I would say, to doing things. So yeah, this is like a very, very interesting experience, and I feel like like last 2 months, I want to go around. I want to go to all of my previous companies, and tell the managers and everybody, hey, look how fast this can go. And like, can you explain me why we cannot do things as fast, or at least let's say half of the speed, in this previous company? And I think it would be a good exercise for many managers in let's say traditional corporate IT to spend a bit of time in a startup and to see how things are agile, how things are happening quickly, and to ask themselves, yeah, why did we accept things going at like a tenth of that pace?
Yeah. And which reminds me also of so when we met in a conference, Date Makers Fest. I think we accidentally ended up on the same car that was driving to the venue, right? And we started talking, and then I also attended your talk. And your talk was about how to, I don't remember the title, I remember the idea that you don't
MLOps
need
on a shoestring.
MLOps on a shoestring. Amazing title. But I remember the main idea that you don't need fancy things to actually do MLOps in your company.
Yeah.
And your example was how to get started with basic MLOps principles, with basic tools, and how to get going. And I thought, wow, like it's so easy. And it feels more like you already had this kind of startup vibe, just let's start and then add complexity as we go.
Yeah.
Versus enterprise, where you need to think many things about many things in advance and plan for that, right? So, and thinking about that talk, like how well these ideas translate to the startup world. Like, what do you see there?
I think it translates very well. I think that startups really, really have to be very lean because they're also operating on a certain kind of a shoestring. So when I delivered that talk, I think one of the first slides was to clarify what shoestring can mean. So we all think of on a shoestring on like a tight budget, which is true, I would say, first of all, for startups. Okay, some startups maybe collect 500 billion or whatever, like
not uncommon these days, right?
to develop open AGI or whatever. But so some startups, some companies, some projects have a tight budget in terms of money. Some have a tight budget in terms of time or in terms of human resources. And so in big companies, it's usually they have a lot of money, but usually you need to choose your battles. It's like you have a gun with 6 bullets, and you need to aim and shoot very carefully, if you understand what I mean. So in that sense, that's the shoestring in a corporation, and in a startup, it's usually money, and it's like number of people, and it's always like big negotiations for them. Are they gonna hire a new person, or are they gonna extend this contract, or are they gonna use this new tool? And so it's very tempting. The thing is, like in a startup, because it's so easy to do many things. Like you just talk to 1 or 2 people and you make an agreement. It's easy to have this like explosion of tools and things that you're using, of accounts and everything, which is what in a big corporation you're prevented from doing. So you're being told, okay, this is the way we do it.
Bureaucracy.
This is used for that.
So,
end of story. Just live with it.
yeah, because which brings me like in my previous company, I needed to onboard a new vendor.
Yeah.
And that was quite an adventure. Like it was so difficult. Like there were so many people involved. And then the contract was not that large. It was actually peanuts. And then like next time I needed to onboard somebody to have a new tool, I would think twice, right? And that's maybe it was not the idea behind.
Is it worth it? Is this worth it?
Yeah, exactly. And then in a startup, you just, like there is a person sitting next to you, you just, hey, like how about, like I just saw this demo, like how about we try it? And let's try it.
Yeah, it's exactly how it goes. Like now with Tempe where I'm working, it's, hey, shall we try this? Shall we try that? Let's try Logfire. Let's try Grafana. Let's try this. And you just see what works best, and then you keep the one that works best. But I think there's also in startups, I think it makes most sense to go for these, let's say, vendor solutions, like cloud-based as software as a service solutions, instead of making your own. So which I think is very common in big companies, that they often want to make something on their own, which is a question how clever of a decision that is, because when you make something, you need to maintain it and so forth. And when you have 4 or 5 up to 10 people in your company, you don't want a dedicated person for doing BI. You would rather have a software as a service, and that you don't have to have a separate person or some kind of infrastructure engineer that's going to maintain the servers and whatnot. If you just think about going on-premise, I think it's very hard for a startup. It would, unless it really makes a lot of sense for them. I think it's like a no-brainer choice to go for the cloud. But then again, there needs to be a clever decision. If you jump into one cloud, then migrating to another cloud can be very slow and annoying. And I think that's something that I saw that Google is, I think, very good at. That Google has some kind of catch them while they're young program.
They give some money, right?
They give some money and some credits to get like this buy-in, and a lot of companies go there, and some of them don't even like it a lot, but like, okay, we're here now, everything is here. It's less cost to just continue with it than to move to something else, which is, well, it's a strategy. It's an approach.
But it was like last time I checked, for small businesses, they gave quite a significant amount of credits.
I don't know what are the numbers. I don't know, but it must be very attractive.
Like I don't know, 50K or something, because
that's
could be like, I don't know, if it's a small company, would be basically free cloud for a year, right?
Yeah. But I think there is some kind of a catch, if I remember correctly.
Of Google Cloud. The main one is you kind of have to stay in Google Cloud, right?
No, but I think there is also like that. Let's say, doesn't apply to everything.
Right, you cannot use like GPUs or stuff.
For example, yeah. But it's kind of a trick, So like if it's 50K, it should be 50K, If I'm gonna burn it in 1 month, that's my problem, huh? But okay, that's
But
I,
can't become chaotic, like, because it's so simple to start to get a new tool and then just play with this. And then at
yeah,
the end, you just end up with a bunch of tools that,
yeah,
barely connect to each other, and then like it's all
yes,
falling apart.
yeah, yeah. In that sense, I think cloud also adds extra complexity. So because I worked mainly on premise, so I would say from these 10 years that I worked in data science, I would say that 8 were on premise, and up to 2 were in the cloud. And I was always yearning for more more cloud experience. And then when I switched to like a fully in the cloud, full platform in the cloud, I was like, no, wait, man, I want to go back to on premise because
Mhm.
I think on premise some things are of course they're less flexible. You don't have the advantage of simple scaling. Scaling is the main um minus, let's say, the lack thereof. Um, but in the end, you see that every infrastructure is like you have machines, whether bare metal or virtual machines. You have some switches and some disks, and you create applications and they run. And you open a firewall and things, and then you go into the cloud and you have all these key management, identity, IAM. You have this, so it quickly becomes like a complete madness.
Mhm.
It has, I think, so many more moving parts that you need to configure, and I think without like infrastructure as code, even with infrastructure as code, it's a mess,
Mhm.
but it's a bearable, I think, manageable mess. At least everything is transparent what exists there. But like if you start configuring things like, and it already happened to me that I had to, because of the lack of time, deploy something through the console, and then I'm like, but 6 months later, would I be able to repeat this? Will I know all the things which I did?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think the cloud adds an extra layer of complexity, and indeed, you can have one tool for the dashboard, one tool for logging, one tool for this, one tool for that, and there's no, I would say, analytical formula that you can like optimize, and find the minimum and and say, okay, this is the right tool stack. I think it's really what they say, what's the right word? An NP NP hard problem or whatever. I'm just
Like,
throwing the
okay,
floor.
it's an MP hard problem, but how do you do this? So, as I understood, you work with companies who are pretty young, so they are startups, and they
This
rely
is
on
this
your
is just the
expertise.
latest the latest experience. Most of my work was actually with big companies, and
Yeah,
now
not last 2 months. So
last
you
months, yeah, indeed,
still
yeah.
need to somehow make a choice, right? So you join them,
Yes,
they
indeed.
ask you, hey,
Well, for me, I would say, yeah. So for this company, the priority is we need to have these features ready within 2 months. We need to have a visualization dashboard. We need to have industrialized API for this, blah blah blah. And then it's like, let's make it as robust and as fast as possible that we can go in the next stage. That we can launch the product. And so I would say based on experience, based on experience, you say, of course, there are 20 things, but I cannot justify to them, hey, let me try 20 things.
mhm, yeah,
But
right.
I can say, okay, based on my experience, this is very good. Let's go with
Mhm,
this.
mhm,
And if it takes me a day or two to make some prototype, I show it and say, okay,
mhm.
does this look good? Let's go with that. And basically, that's the. I think you can never make a mistake if you select one of the, let's say, a database. Postgres. You go with Postgres. It's I would say nobody's gonna tell you why did you choose Postgres. There are certain tools which if you select, you're not gonna get bashed by anyone. It's like, okay, makes sense. Postgres. It's it's
Yeah.
it's a proven
Mhm.
proven thing, and yeah.
And I guess at the beginning, maybe because we recently had a discussion in Slack, and there was question about Kubeflow. I don't know if you tried Kubeflow. Um,
It's the I think I today talked to somebody about it. Wait, Kubeflow is the Kubernetes platform, MLOps platform, full blown
yeah,
thing.
exactly.
I never tried it. I just saw some demos.
hmm I tried it. It was a huge pain because like all these YAML files and stuff,
Uh-huh.
like Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And sometimes like, okay, maybe it makes sense like in the long run, but at the beginning, maybe you just have a Flask app, right? And or whatever, first
Yeah.
API. And
Yeah.
that's enough because like correct me if I'm wrong, but that was like in your talk you were showing like how
Yeah.
you can get started with simple tools
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
going for the big things that maybe in 2 years, this is what you need. But right now, you just want to move quickly and then just select the simplest tool for the task, right? And then make sure it's as fast as reliable as possible. It's not super complicated and you move fast, right? And then like if you need to spend a week trying to configure Kubeflow, then maybe it's not the best tool, right?
Yeah, indeed. I agree. I think all these, the more something is, how to say, the richer a solution is with features, I think the more it will drag you into, let's say, getting locked into it, you know. So doing something in Python with Python scripts on a remote server, you know, like for development and whatever, you can always change a server, you can always change a provider. But if you want to completely migrate everything, it becomes very, very difficult. Or if you're using whatever now, what this Google Cloud has, Vertex AI or SageMaker, if you start doing that, you're pretty much tied to that. And you know, if you want to, let's say you have all the legacy models, now you want to move to a new platform, what are you going to do? You're going to need to retrain. Did you train those models in a reproducible way? That's a big question. So
I see.
Choose wisely.
So at the beginning, what we should take away from what you just said is like at the beginning, try to make your choices more portable, let's say. Like if you go for tools, like be more generic rather than specific to a particular vendor.
Yeah, well, I think that makes you more portable indeed. So somebody maybe wants to start as fast as possible by using some kind of a low-code solution. Maybe if you can only hire a data scientist and not like a proper, for this what I'm talking about, you need a proper, I would say, software engineer and systems engineer. If you don't have such people, you cannot afford them, then you are going to go with some low-code platform where the data scientist is just dealing with developing a model in some kind of a notebook environment and then launching it through a click deploy and something like that. But yeah, then you have lock-in. I guess this can also work, but I prefer to have this freedom, to keep this freedom. Yeah.
So let's imagine I am a machine learning engineer and I have two offers. So one offer is from a startup and one is from a Fortune 500 company. How do I select?
Like how much money?
Let's say it's well, of course, a startup pays less, right? But then
they have some options.
You don't have this, and let's say you don't have 3 kids. I mean, I know you do, but like this imaginary ML engineer does not, so they don't need to care that much about money.
Yeah. It depends. So I would rather go for a startup. Especially, it depends also on the stage of your career. Are you talking about a person in the early stages of their career?
Maybe we can talk about like what kind of things we need to think about. Like
so whether... I would say a corporation is usually where you have, I would say, job safety and you have a narrow scope of work. So if you are fine with being a specialist in one thing and just sticking to that specialty and having a 9-to-5 job where you close your laptop at 5 and you go home, then the corporation is the right place for you. And that's, I would say, a legitimate choice, which I have also made for a number of years. On the other side, if you want to, I would say, move faster, if you want to learn faster, try more things, not spend, I would say, unnecessary time in pointless meetings and so forth, then a startup is a better place. But also with a startup, you can make a mistake. You know, it's I think with small companies, if it's like a bad atmosphere or something, you cannot escape it. You know, it's like I think in a bigger company there are more teams, and if there's like a bad team at one place, you can switch to another team or something. You know, there's a bit more. This internal mobility in big companies is a good thing. So you can also have like a long career in one big company and switch around different departments. So people can be like in data engineering, then go to machine learning, then go to MLOps, DevOps, whatever. And in a small startup, I would say if it's if it's not nice. I mean, where the guys I'm working with now is I think it's all great. I could not be happier. But yeah, there are other stories I have heard also. And usually it's like startup is like you're working for something on a long, something in the future. You're expecting for this whole work to pay off in terms of like when the company is sold or something like that. But in general, I think it's like also like I would advise, I think for people that want to learn a lot in the early stages of their career, it's also why I prefer consultancies compared to big, let's say, companies where you work internally, because within consultancies you can change a lot of clients and you can see a lot of things. Like in a startup, you can try different tools, try different approaches. But in these also this consulting business, you can triangulate in a way. You can average and see a bit what are the patterns that are repeating and see what are just bizarre things that one company did. So it's interesting for me that when you go to these big companies, you will often hear this is how we do it, and this is like just like some bizarre, weird way they have set up some kind of a CI/CD pipeline or like a standard Python project where you see that it was set up by somebody who never touched Python before, but he was given the task of maybe like a C# or Java developer, which was told, hey, you should now set up a Python project structure. And yeah, it looks completely weird. But people get used to it, people get used to that, and they're like, they don't see, they're, like what's it, is it the Plato or Aristotle's cave, the old story of like people living in a cave, and they never see the light. There's the old story from Greek philosophy. So it's kind of like that, that people get so used to this thing that they don't realize it's wrong. And I know when I came to some companies and told them, guys, this is a wrong way to do it. And one woman told me, thank you, because I felt it was wrong, but I did not have arguments to She said, I just
But like, even
here.
if it's wrong, you don't always have the flexibility to change it.
Yeah,
But so many other
if you've
things
also never seen a better way, it's hard for you to say.
Right.
Something can feel wrong, but you cannot say, but this is the alternative we should go to, and then it's good when somebody with external experience can come in and say, okay, this is a better way, and I can show you the better way.
So let's say if I just graduated and I join a corporation and I work for
Yeah.
10 years there, that's all I know, right? I don't know other ways of doing things. And maybe it's like not the most optimal way of solving things, but this is all I know and this is what I learned.
Yeah.
But in a startup, you kind of explore other, like many things. And also maybe one of the things you didn't mention, but it was what was happening when I was having my startup experience.
Yeah.
You pivot a lot, like especially if it's a small, young startup.
Yeah.
And like, okay, there's one client, they want this. Okay, this client now decided not to continue with us, but there is another client, but they want to have a completely different thing. Now let's stop what we work on and try to please this client. And which means like, I don't know, 180 degree shift from what you've been doing.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, it's never boring, right?
Indeed.
And you learn many things.
I think startup, for me, it feels like a pack of hunters, that are going somewhere in the wild and trying to catch a big animal, so there's this uncertainty, there's this kind of also tight spirit, I would say. And I think you really feel more of this ownership, but also like what I did in the last 2 months for Tembo, it's I would need at least 2 or 3 other teams to do the same things in a big corporation. So I did, apart from my core task was to industrialize this Python code to go from like a, let's say, more data science, big script piece of code to like a proper Python project. And okay, that I could do anywhere alone, but to then provision infrastructure on my own, to create a pipeline, to create a repository on my own. In many companies, you cannot create a repository. You cannot, you don't have any control over the CI/CD pipeline. There is a team that exists there, and you need to submit a ticket. So it feels like a city hall, for many things. It's like, you sit in a room and you have your ticket and you're waiting in line, and you know how to do all these things. And it's like, guys, just let me do it. I know how to do this. If you want to have somebody monitoring, watching my back, if I mess something up, fine. But just, let me do these things. It's not so complicated. In the end, it's like a couple of YAML files and, a couple of configurations here and there. So it's also in big companies, you have this like, it's called agile, but it's everything but agile. As they say in big corporations, agile is like waterfall in sprints. It's like you just break it down and you just slice waterfall a bit more. And you have this like, oh, quarterly planning, and if you're late for the quarterly planning, they say, oh, come in 3 months. We're all booked. And so
I have PTSD. Like,
you have flashbacks.
flashbacks now. Oh, sorry, it's not in our OKRs for this quarter.
Yeah. No, but how should I say? I'm not gonna. I said in advance I'm gonna bash corporations a bit, but I had a lot of good time there. I had a lot of very good teams, very good friends, which I really love. And these corporations, as I said, like they give you some stability, they give you some. I would say you know what to expect there, and you learn some things also. You learn, like, for example, this whole networking thing. In a big company, it's even more important than your, I would say, hands-on knowledge, is to build a network within the company and to have what I would call my guy in DevOps, my guy in networking, and so that you have people with which you have good connections. So it should not be like that, because everything should work through requests and this and that. But in the end, that there, out of 10 people, there's this guy that and he's going to do it faster for you. So again, like a city hall, if you know the right people.
If I summarize what you said, so corporation, you get job safety, financial stability, narrow scope of work, you become a specialist in one thing, plus there is some guidance, there is some framework, and if you're just getting started, having this framework that kind of teaches you how to do things could be helpful. You have internal mobility. It's less flexibility in tech, because all the things already have already been decided. And it can feel like a city hall, because a town hall, because there are so many different teams, and then you need to create a ticket for each to have something done. And then all this creates bureaucratic overhead, because you have this, what you called waterfall and sprints. So you have quarterly planning, and then if something is not planned for this quarter, you have to wait till the next one sometimes. Things. In startups, you move and learn faster. You have fewer meetings, less bureaucracy. Then mostly you work with greenfield projects. So you don't have a lot of legacy, existing structures, existing frameworks. And while these frameworks can be helpful, they can how to say, let you move slower, right? And when you don't have these restrictions, don't have these frameworks, you can move faster.
But I think also a good framework should make you move faster. That's the thing. So in a corporation, you can also, one of my jobs was to make frameworks to speed up things. Because if okay, now the next 2-3 years we're going to have similar projects where we need to build some models for email classification and then deploy them quickly. And now we're going to make some kind of a template so that this thing is deployed as fast as possible. So that's how it should be. But I think there is something which goes wrong when I think a good approach in corporate and big IT would be this enabler platform building and not slicing. I think when people do it wrong is when they slice and dice these domains of responsibility too much, And I think ideally it should be that your developers, people making applications, should not know that a DevOps team exists or that a platform team exists. If you make it like that, you're winning. I think if you can say, okay, there's a guy there, he wants to make something, and they can do the whole thing and their whole automation and deployment, that maybe just that they in the beginning need to submit a couple of requests to create some infrastructure. Of course, nobody should be allowed to just, boot 100 VMs with 100 GPUs. But it can be done in a better way. That's my point. So I don't think any of these things, which I just talked as downsides, as minus points, is how should I say, the destiny, the ultimate, I would say, fate of all these companies. I just think that it can be done better, in these big companies, especially because they have a lot of resources, they have a lot of people. So the good thing there is that also you usually are part of a big team, and you usually can fall back on somebody. In a startup, it's very difficult if you want to go I want to go for holidays, oh, wait, but who's gonna pick up your work? In a bigger company, there's always somebody else there, and there's also always somebody to ask if something is not working. If how this thing was done, why is this pipeline breaking, what's happening, what do I do here? So that's a really good thing that you're not alone. And in a startup, I think it's because it's so lean. I think it's like a general rule. They say like you should not be, for example, a first data scientist in any organization, especially if you're a junior. If you're a very senior, that's fine. But if you're being asked to join a team as a junior and the only person like look somewhere else, probably the same goes for data engineering and everything.
So what you just said is like it's more chaos in startup, and you need to be fine with this chaos, and you need to.
Yeah. It's a bit of like war path. Like you need to be a bit more robust and I would say comfortable.
Never boring. But also what you didn't mention and what was the experience for me is it's never boring, yes. And you have this full end-to-end ownership of things, and you feel this, okay, I produce some code and I see this in action. Like it doesn't need to go through like all these 10 steps of approval, whatever. But on the other hand, because there is this constant firefighting mode, like you constantly pivot, you constantly work on something, like things break, you try to fix them. At least that was my experience. At the end of the day, I felt so exhausted. Like I was given like not even 100%, but more. And it was like super difficult for me to do anything after work. And then like after 1 year, I was like,
done.
Exactly. So like I just burned out. And in the
yeah.
corporation, that does not happen, right? So you don't have this speed with which you have to move.
Yeah.
It's like, you have to run all the time. And in the corporation, it's more like, a walk in a park.
Yeah.
And
indeed, it is. But that's why I say it all has has pluses and minuses. I agree. So this is, for me, it's like just refreshing that I can move at my maximum speed, But again, I'm doing this for 2 months. So if I would do this at my maximum speed for a year, I would probably, also be close to burnout. But then, in Eastern Europe, we don't have burnout,
Yeah, right. Well, what is that?
What is that? We don't accept it.
But like the amount of things I learned, because I needed to build so many things from scratch, and experience like many problems, like things break, how to make them work with real clients. I learned so many things.
Yeah, that's true. But you know what I see as a risk now with LLMs, with AI coding, AI-assisted coding? I think it's a kind of a trap because I realized how quickly also I could do many things for which I'm not really an expert. And it works, but I'm thinking like, okay, this is 2 months. Probably it's still not a lot. But I'm thinking if I worked for 2 years and doing things, so let's say my primary competence is Python coding, but then suddenly I do some kind of an Ansible script and I used AI to help me with that. And then I use some kind of a GitHub pipeline and AI helps with that, And if there's like 10, 20, 30 places, which is not like, let's say, then some bash scripts, or I start making some HTML and JavaScript, because I can, because now the AI will help me with all of that and it will not take me ages. I'm just thinking that because I've seen people online say, yeah, man, now one person does things in 3 weeks. Yeah, but what part of all that code is like technical debt? What part of that code which you produced quickly will be a monster to maintain 1 year later, because
90%?
90%, yeah. And then that's what I joked also online, like how, you have NoSQL, which is like, you have SQL, which is schema on write, then you have NoSQL, which is schema on read. And now with AI coding, it's like learn on write before, and now it's learn on maintain, So you need to, when you go back to your code, when it breaks, then you need to learn it, And we're gonna have some interesting, I would say.
But like for a startup, it's okay, right? Or not? Depending on how much you let this technical debt to accumulate, right?
Yeah, but you imagine like you see some code in a company and you see something weird, and you go and you say git blame, and you say who made this? And often I do this and I ask, hey man, what is the meaning of this? Like, why did you do this like exception handling in this way, for example? And then a person can tell me, yeah, because of this and that problem. Okay, but if this person used an LLM, he cannot give me
Uh-huh.
an answer.
Uh-huh.
No,
And
I said, oh, that's
what
what
if
the
this
LLM.
person is you?
Yeah. That also happens. Yeah, but so that's gonna be. I think that the LLMs are mainly drastically increasing the amount of of technical debt we are pumping out. I would say
Yeah, right.
moment. But yeah, you feel very fast. I did certain simple
Yeah.
applications super quickly,
Mm.
but yeah,
But
feels a bit
like
risky.
for a startup, isn't it okay to move fast and then deal with some, like, of course, you need to keep this in mind. You know that, okay, now you have this technical debt that you will have to repay, but you accept it and you
Yeah,
move
but it
fast.
needs to be someone who is aware. It's like in code, whenever I do something quickly in a quick and dirty way, I write a to do or a note saying this needs to be checked. There needs to be some kind of a trace that
And if
But
it's
if
an
you're just like
entire
if you're just a
Python file,
junior, yeah. If you're just a junior, there's like you're you're not aware. I mean, it's very easy to move fast and leave, I don't know, a certain port open and leave certain security holes. And then
Mhm,
your startup, let's say you're building a startup and it's very important. Let's say your data is 90% of the value, and then your data gets leaked and you
mhm,
killed your startup.
mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so moving fast, like you should take informed risks. You
Mhm,
should be aware of the risks you're taking, and you should have some kind of a mitigation strategy, an
mhm,
idea. Okay, this is going to be like a big red flag. And I'm going to say we should always have this like pin somewhere on top of our mailboxes or wherever, or in front of post it on my screen, that I still have this vulnerability or issue, which
mhm,
I'm currently living with, And
mhm,
if you're using, I think, these LLMs too much, just being optimistic, cross yourself and like hope it works, then then I think it's yeah, it can lead to many ugly situations.
So be ready to have to repay this debt at some point.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, but I think it's a good way that it's called debt, because indeed it's something that you take a loan to leverage something to
Mhm.
like start delivering some value as soon as possible. But you indeed need to be aware, because if you're not aware of the repayment,
Mhm.
then it's just I
Yeah.
don't know, some fatal disease eating you up and you're not even
Mhm.
aware.
Yeah. That's why you mentioned that it's not a good idea to join a startup as a junior, especially if you're the only, let's say, data scientist and you're a junior data scientist joining that startup. Because you might now with LLMs, you can actually do a lot, but because of your lack of experience, you might not realize that some things are suboptimal or you leave in
Yeah,
some things open. And because you don't
yeah,
have this experience and nobody is there to actually tell you, hey, like, you shouldn't do this,
yeah,
then it can create problems, right?
yeah, definitely,
Okay.
definitely.
So then for a junior, would you say that it's better to go to corporation or a more established team?
Any company where there is like one plus two or two more than two seniors that you can learn
Yeah.
from.
Mhm. So
I
if
think
you're a
that's. I
junior,
think. I think as a junior, I think as a very junior person, I think you will learn anywhere, actually, like in your
Mhm.
first 2 3 years of experience. But then it can happen that you feel a bit saturated,
Mhm.
and then you can maybe look
Mhm.
for other options, because yeah, like in consulting, it's normal that you change all these clients. If you do that, jumping from one company to another, then it can look bad on your CV.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's what I also like about freelancing, that it's a
Mhm.
lot of little missions that you can chain, and it's still fine.
I realized that we have quite a few questions, and
Oh, okay.
we
Okay.
can try to cover them. So one of the questions is, which tools do you use for your MLOps projects? And what's your advice on investing time on new or old tools? It's actually like there is a third question, but let's start. So it's like three questions in one. So
Okay.
which tools do you use now for your MLOps projects?
So right now, my main, I would say, approach was it's actually to be as minimal as possible as the talk I delivered. So I mainly use really Python, pure Python, and develop scripts for training in Python. And I try to do as much as I can of the orchestration through CI/CD. I'm now supposed to start working on a project where Dagster will be used as an orchestration tool. And I like Dagster a lot. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to use it, so that's why I'm looking forward to that. But I mean, you need some kind of an orchestrator, definitely. And I used MLflow. I recently helped the startup set up their internal MLflow tracking server. So I think that, yeah, you just look at the basic components of an MLOps framework, and there's not a lot actually. You have the model registry, you have the feature stores. So I still did not I still not help anybody set up a feature store, but I try to go for the tools which are, let's say, in that moment, let's say top 3 tools that are established already, mature enough, and I just go for them. One new thing which I tried recently, which I liked a lot, is for observability. It's more for the operations part of the whole flow. It's Logfire. It's built by Samuel Logfire. It's Pydantic Logfire. So Samuel Colvin, which developed Pydantic, and his team, they developed this Logfire library, which is like an online platform, and then you just basically add a couple of lines in your code, and it automatically sends logs with very detailed, like you can see very detailed tracebacks of exceptions and everything. That thing I liked really a lot because I tried to set up Grafana or something like Prometheus and Grafana and this and that, and I just gave up. And then I tried Logfire and I started working with it within an hour. And that's something I really like for observability. And it can also help you collect like system logs, like memory, CPU logs, and everything, and your application logs wherever you. So if you, let's say, if you use Fast API, it has like this, let's call it instrumentation plugins for Fast API or for TensorFlow or for this and that, and then it collects some extra information on these tools. But you have a lot of options there. If you just need, there's tons of blog posts where you can see all possible configurations. Yeah.
So I think, that sounds, it's the first time I hear about this. So previously, like for logs, the stack I would go with would be Elk, Elasticsearch Logstash Kibana, or sometimes instead of Logstash, you have something else, but it's not the point.
It's very new. It's like less than a year old. And it's like the big new project from the Pydantic people. Yeah.
So when it comes to Grafana, you don't use it usually.
No, I started and I gave up. It looks like too mature, so I'm not a BI person. And for example, recently I used for some visualization, I also used Streamlit. So I really like how Streamlit works. Of course.
Yeah, it's so simple.
It's so simple, but the only thing I have a problem with, like also MLflow, Streamlit, is like the moment you want to get to the point of like authentication, and like they do have some basic authentication, but it's hard to get like full enterprise level stuff. Like, I don't know, integrating with Active Directory or whatnot. For that, you need to take some kind of a paid version on Databricks. Databricks has it or whatever. Yeah.
It's not that simple. I remember trying to talk to Databricks people saying, hey, I just look MLflow with authentication. I don't need anything else, just MLflow.
Yeah.
And but it only comes with the Databricks platform, so you kind of have to take the whole thing.
Yeah. That's also, I think, a bad decision. If any vendors are listening, I think every product should be as modular as possible, and that you can just take that part. If you have like a really good model registry, you should let people use just your model registry, or just very good observability. Just let people use that one and don't force them to buy everything.
Yeah, but maybe Databricks doesn't really care about MLflow that much. They care more about like selling, because this is where they make money, and people eventually just go with weights and biases or something like that, or registry, whatever. So, like, this question has actually 3 questions. So the second one is, what's your advice on investing time or new or old tools? I guess the question is like, how do you?
Well, old tools. What are old tools? No,
Let's say
no.
Grafana is an old tool and Lockfire is a new tool.
Yeah. Poof. Well, I would say the old tools are so the ones which are survived, which have survived the
Mhm.
everything, the every apocalypse. You should definitely always learn about, I would say, Linux. You should know Linux, Python. These things are like the foundational bash scripting. If you know these things, a bit of networking, a bit of Ansible, or some of these things are very very useful. Like a bit of also like front end development, like just
Mhm.
to know how HTML and CSS and JavaScript work together, and to make a very simple
Mhm.
application. All these things I think give you like a lot of depth. I would not say, I mean, if something old and deprecated,
Mhm.
I don't think it
Like
makes
maybe you
much sense.
shouldn't go with Java 6 right
Well,
now.
look, I also don't think that, yeah, there are people who are still there are young people learning mainframe development, and still you have a lot of mainframe code. So it's like a gamble. So are you like what's your risk appetite? Do you want to go to target a certain niche? Yeah, you can learn Haskell and Perl and find a job with it, and there will
Mhm.
not be a big pool of candidates for that.
Mhm.
But then you have to be ready to be hungry for a couple of months potentially while waiting for the right job. But if you
But
want to
you
see,
still code in Haskell, even though you're hungry, right? Maybe it's
yeah,
worth it.
yeah. But if you want to play it safe, I think it's very simple. You open up job postings and you make a little scraping script which downloads a lot of job postings, and you see what are the keywords which get repeated, and you learn that. That's
Mhm.
basically what I did.
Yeah.
That's how I got into Python. Yeah.
And if you do that, and let's say you see that all companies use Airflow, right? So that's all they want.
Yeah.
But like Airflow is not, I don't know, it's okay, it works, but like not the best user experience, and there are so many other orchestrators, right?
Yeah.
And they want to learn one of them, even though like 70% of companies still stick to Airflow, and
Yeah.
I understand them.
Yeah.
Like most banks still stick to Java, right? Even though there are, I don't know, other languages.
Yeah.
Um, so in this case, I still do the scraping. I see that these are the tools. I don't know,
Mm.
Java, Airflow, like all these things.
Yeah.
But how do I try to also include like new things here that
Yeah.
maybe
Well,
not all use?
I
Not.
would say you from time to time you need to tick some boxes, and that's also what I did, for example, with Azure. So although I'm not currently working on Azure, but I got some feedback from certain recruiters that, yeah, like in Belgium, a lot of companies are using Azure and moving there. And so it's very good to have a certain certification. And so like, okay, I'm going to get some certification in Azure. So I would say do at least the bare minimum to understand a certain tool. You don't have to become an expert in let's say Airflow. But
Yeah.
how much time does it really take to know something about MLflow? A couple of days or playing
Mhm.
with it or something? You can find that time. And then you can say, I know something in MLflow. You can do some kind of a Udemy course or
Yeah.
whatever, and you check the box.
Just
I
talk to
know this.
ChatGPT.
It's like PySpark.
Mhm.
I think 4 out of 5 interviews where I went, they asked me about PySpark. And they even had some kind of Spark clusters, not always, but let's say 2 out of 5 times they had Spark clusters.
Mhm.
They always asked about PySpark, but I never had to do, I don't know if I spent 1% of time doing anything related to Spark. But it's like,
Mhm.
oh, do you have the box? You said, but it's not important, but do you have the box?
Mhm.
And so certain it's a looking for a job and getting through these first stages of interviews, it's like a kind of a game,
Mhm.
where you need to just be compatible. I know some people are also, I apply for a job which is called a data scientist, but the description is for machine learning engineer. I see the description is for machine learning engineering. And I send my CV where it says machine learning engineer. And they say, but this is for a data scientist. Like,
Mhm.
okay, I change it to senior data scientist. I said, okay, now it's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have these situations also.
Mhm. And what trends do you see in the future? Like, do you see like certain tools getting traction or like certain things getting traction?
I really don't know what to say. I mean, now it's all, I think 99% of our attention is focused on LLMs.
Yeah,
and
that's
everybody's
definitely a
looking
trend.
at that. And I'm just thinking, like, what are we ignoring while we're all looking just at LLMs? I don't know. I think this is like the hottest field now, and
Mhm,
everybody's investing in this and making chatbots, and you still see that there is still a lot of things
mhm, mhm.
which are not
The-
satisfying.
Yeah,
Sorry.
maybe it's a problem actually, because like I don't know to what extent it's a problem, but many companies who were doing MLOps observability or data observability, now they are positioning themselves as LLM observability tools,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
it's like, okay, you have these MLOps tools, and now MLOps is not as cool anymore, like
yeah,
because if you want to get a new round of investment, then you
yeah.
kind of have to be AI or LLM or whatever
Mm.
to get money from investors. So I understand why companies are kind of trying to get a cut of this pie.
Yeah, they're also ticking the box. They're also
Yeah.
doing this game.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
but when it like MLOps is not dead, like we still do MLOps, we still talk about MLOps. It's just it doesn't get as much attention as let's say 3 years ago. But
yeah.
still, the problem MLOps solves, these problems did not go away. We still have
Yes,
these
indeed,
problems.
indeed. But I think it's the same with people with also data engineering is much older than MLOps engineering, and still you hear many senior data engineers and guys saying, "Hey, we're still facing with the same issues,
Mm,
with data quality, lineage, and so forth." So yeah, we are not a fad anymore. We're not the popular kids,
mhm.
but still we have work to do,
Yeah.
and I still did not see. So my ideal when I was going into machine learning engineering, because I was first a data scientist, and then I was like, okay, I want to build something for the data scientist that I was. Let's say I would like my former self. I would like to build something that my former self would have an easier time with, and I still did not see companies which really made that a breeze.
Mhm.
So there is still a lot to do, and with
Mhm.
LLMs, it's really, I think it's a really complicated problem. You see how many chatbots you can hijack and make it write code for you. Like
Mhm.
you want to buy something on an e-commerce website, and then suddenly you can hijack it and make it say whatever you want if you're
Yeah.
clever enough. So there is still a lot of stuff there. And honestly, I did not just knowing that I cannot expect it to always give me a valid JSON
Mhm.
makes me not want to use it at all,
Yeah. Right.
So I'm like, this sounds too flaky, it's like going into having this engineering mindset. I want to have things predictable, working 100%
Mhm.
of the time, repeatable, unless somebody pulls the plug on a server,
Mhm.
and like just having to worry, will the LLM suddenly hallucinate and return,
Mhm.
I don't know, a YAML instead of a JSON?
Yeah.
Call me back when you do that, when you
Mhm.
figure that out.
Well, interesting that you mentioned that because machine learning is also not deterministic, but it's
Yeah,
more deterministic than at least we learned how to make it reliable, right? We
yeah,
as ML engineers. With
yeah.
LLM, we're still getting there, right?
Yeah, at least in the classical machine learning, at least the output is structured in the
Yeah, right.
way I want it, and I can control
Mhm.
it. But if I just have to beg the LLM, please, there's a good meme, like, please, man, like my career depends on it, just
Yeah.
just give me a valid JSON. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's a bit
Okay,
of a
so
bummer.
maybe last question. We
Yeah.
take a question from Luca. You mentioned that you have this on-prem experience, and most of the companies that you worked at, corporations, they were more like on-prem than cloud.
Yeah.
And the question from Luca is, do you think that on-prem is going to be the future for companies that care about data privacy? Because we talked about LLM, and
Yeah.
with LLMs, it's also possible to host something internally on-prem, whatever.
Mm.
Um, so do you think, like, when it comes to data privacy, especially you worked in finance and also in
Yeah.
healthcare a little bit, this is a big thing there, like data privacy.
Yeah, indeed. That's
Are they
also
going to
that's often
continue?
one of the main reasons why they are slow with going to the cloud.
Yeah.
And many of these companies are moving. So I said, in all of them, in the financial industry, they are mostly on premise and moving to the cloud, but they are very careful with what they move to the cloud. You know,
Mhm.
and so it's something which technically might maybe possible to be done in a couple of months. They will drag it to a year or two because of all the I understand it's necessary discussions about privacy, about encryption, about whatever man in the middle attack, whatever can happen. But there is also kind of, I think it's more than a year, I think, old, this whole kind of a back to on-prem movement. There are many companies which decided to ditch the cloud and go back to on-premise. If you have a good team of engineers which are able to do that, so many companies have shown. The guy that developed Ruby on Rails, I forgot his name, it's DHH or something like that. I could, right?
I think so.
He has a couple of blog posts of how his company moved back to on-premise and millions they saved.
Right.
On cloud costs. So
it's like with AWS Lambda, right? So AWS Lambda is great when you just want to you start, you don't have predictable workload, but then at some point you need to move to like dedicated machines that are up and running all the time. And the same with cloud versus on-prem, I guess. At some point, you just understand that if you just manage these things yourself, then it's cheaper in the long run.
Yeah. But you need to have the knowledge to do it. You know, if you just have a data scientist, which is using a low-code platform, he's not going to be able to run everything on-premise, you know. So.
One last question, quick one. So you mentioned, we talked about PySpark a little bit. And you said that you didn't really need to work a lot, but still, like, in order to tick the boxes.
Just minimally. But it was very important in every interview that I know it.
But like, have you used Dask? Do you think it's a good alternative for distributed training?
I tried using Dask. I tried it, but locally only. On my at one point I had some parallel processing I had to do, and in fact, I don't know what I did wrong, because it wasn't. I didn't have a lot of time. I just like installed it and tried to work with it to try to like chunk this big data frame and do the processing. In the end, it was slower than just pandas, you know. And so, but I assume that there was something. So depends on what are you doing. Are you like merging something, or depends on the operation? If you're just aggregating, it probably be faster. But yeah, it's always like that. I think I also have one old blog post about it. Was it on Spark or on Array or something like that? Where indeed, when you have just like group by aggregate, fine. But if you have just a small table which you merge across a cluster or something, it's a complete disaster in terms of performance. So Dask is, I know it's around for a while, and I think they also work in a distributed manner, right? I think you can use Dask like Spark. But I did not see it used around.
So usually companies still go with Spark if they need some distributed.
Indeed. That's what I could see. I did not see anybody using Dask. But as I said, experimented, but not with a lot of success, which doesn't mean it's a bad tool, just that I did not know how to use it.
My experience 5 years ago was that it couldn't do group by, but I think many things have changed since then. So anyways, thanks a lot. Sorry for taking a little bit more of your time, but it was amazing. It's always great to have you here as a guest. And as you hinted at the beginning, maybe we can do this a recurrent thing. I don't see anything wrong with that. So always pleasure talking with you. And thanks for finding time to have this chat. And I'm looking forward to seeing you sometime soon.
Likewise.
And thanks everyone for stopping by, for being active. I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.